Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. Now, stress and anxiety are very real emotions for all of us. When we feel anxious, the most natural thing to do is to try and avoid it, because when we avoid those things that we fear, we get some relief, we calm down. But the problem is, we're unwittingly making our anxiety worse. It's something I've personally struggled with too in the past, especially my previous corporate career. But since training and understanding the neuroscience behind these behaviours, I realised now the things I was doing back then were only keeping me stuck. Because fear and anxiety encourages specific responses in your actions and your behaviours that help you out in that moment. But long term, you might actually be making yourself more anxious. So in this video, I'm going to explain what these habits are, why they happen, and what you can do to start breaking that cycle of anxiety so you can build the courage and the confidence to do more of the things that you used to avoid. But first, let me explain why these habits develop and why they make your anxiety worse. You see, from every decision you make, every decision you have, your brain is always learning. And each experience, whether that's positive or negative, your brain is storing away every experience as evidence so it can keep you safe in the future, and that just feeds your beliefs. So when you avoid that thing that you fear or you worry about, your brain never actually collects the evidence in your mind that you can survive those things. And that's why actually just telling yourself that something is safe or it's okay just isn't good enough, because your brain needs to actually experience those things to collect the evidence that it is safe. And this is all thanks to the primitive structures of our brain, the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the hypothalamus. It's those parts which help to survive when being fearful and anxious really did ensure we lived another day. And so if we avoid situations that make us anxious, our brain learns that avoidance equals safety. So you feel safe in that moment, you get some short relief, but your brain is actually cementing the idea that these situations are indeed dangerous, and so it becomes a cycle of negative reinforcement, a loop that keeps anxiety alive and actually makes it worse over time. So if we want to break the anxiety cycle, it's not just about telling your brain that it's safe, it's about showing it gradually. And at the end of this video, I'm going to share my 4 favourite skills you can use to sit with anxiety to help you reduce it over time, as you show your brain gradually it is safe to challenge yourself. Think of it as a bit of a process that helps you rewrite the script in your mind, teaching your brain that anxiety isn't as threatening as you once believed. So let's look at the 5 habits that make anxiety worse. Now, the first comes in many forms. It might be that invitation you decline, or that delivery that you opt for rather than going out to the store so you can avoid those anxious feelings. You get that feeling of relief because you've not put yourself in that distressing situation. However, in the long term, you become more and more unwilling to confront anxiety, and your fears possibly grow. And then when that day comes when you need to actually face it again, it can be completely overwhelming. So the thing to remember here is that avoidance leads to short-term relief, but longer-term anxiety. Now, if you're willing to experience and welcome the things you avoid, it leads to shorter-term anxiety and longer-term confidence. Now, when avoidance isn't possible, when anxiety hits you, you might use the next safety behaviour as a means of minimising or dealing with that situation. Now, escape involves leaving or removing yourself from that feared situation immediately. Maybe social events, public speaking, for example, supermarkets, the list goes on. But you just get that urge to get out of there really quickly. My clients often tell me how this has made them leave a gathering early, walked out in the middle of giving a speech, or even found themselves hiding in the bathroom during a dinner party. But remember, learning to tolerate and cope with those anxious feelings and gradually increasing your experience of them helps to confirm to your mind that you can survive and it's safe to feel at ease. And so it's no wonder that when you worry about situations like this, you might play out all the worst case scenarios in your mind. Perhaps when you're asked to give that presentation at work, or there's a social gathering looming, you begin to worry about everything that could go wrong. You might actually start to rehearse all the problems and the dreadful scenarios that could happen in that feared situation. You worry. And when you do that, it's often because you mistakenly believe it's helping you to control those feelings, perhaps by imagining all the things which could go wrong, because it feels a bit like problem solving. But actually in reality, it makes you more anxious and you don't actually fix anything. But because it feels good in that moment, our emotional mind encourages us to do more of it. Because it always refers us back to previous patterns of behaviour that it thinks is helpful in a way to cope with that situation. even actually if it makes you more anxious and more hypervigilant. So actually, if you want to feel less anxious, learn to control your worry, not the anxiety, and recognise that you do have a choice to elaborate on your worries or imagine the worst case scenario. Perhaps observe your thoughts as passing thoughts rather than absolute truth. Label them with phrases like, well, I'm having this thought that, and that just helps you create some space and distance from your worries, and that reduces the impact on your feelings so you can look for more balanced perspectives and rational ways to solve challenges. And the problem is, if you allow your worries to take hold, especially leading up to something you've been fearful of in the past or perhaps you've avoided, it really does engage that subconscious part of your mind that will keep you stuck and fearful. And I hear this so often from my clients too. Perhaps they're avoiding things, they're choosing to actually isolate themselves away from situations, from colleagues, friends, even family, in an effort to feel safe. Again, this gives them some temporary relief, but it's simply confirming to the subconscious mind that it's a helpful behaviour next time. And so when anxiety levels rise, worry happens, negative thinking occurs, this will be the default behaviour you're encouraged to go back to. So rather than challenging yourself, showing your brain that you can do these things, even in a small way, this withdrawal and isolation means more and more isolation, fewer social interactions, and more anxiety when you next need to be with people, when you next need to be in that situation. So it leaves you stuck in that isolation loop. It's interesting though that many clients tell me that when they actually challenge themselves to do that thing they were avoiding, they actually proved their brains wrong and they actually enjoyed it. And that's so important because when we have good social connections and interaction that we enjoy, it gives you a boost because that positive social interaction, even brief ones actually, can lead to the release of neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. And that really contributes to feelings of happiness and well-being. And it helps you break that cycle of isolation too as a coping strategy. When you're feeling anxious, you're able to then show your brain that it is okay and break that loop. And so we can think of these neurotransmitters as tiny messengers in your brain, carrying chemical signals between cells, and they play a really crucial role in influencing your mood and your actions. And that's why actually certain coping strategies like comfort foods, eating chocolate or junk food, can give you a quick bit of relief, because eating releases dopamine, and that's that brain chemical that makes us feel good, temporarily counteracting those feelings of anxiety and stress, so you get that little bit of relief. So we can learn to use food to soothe negative or challenging emotions because we believe it's making us feel better. But actually, it's making anxiety worse longer term. But of course, your brain's reward system is designed to reinforce behaviours that are perceived as rewarding. So as a result, you'll be encouraged to repeat those behaviours in the future to experience the same relief when low mood or anxiety rises again. So one really helpful step here is to identify your triggers and ask yourself what situations or what feelings get you thinking about food. So when you feel like reaching for something, stop and try and figure out what sparked that urge. Perhaps write it down. And when you understand that, you can start to make some changes. Ask yourself, perhaps, what are some alternatives to food that will help you feel better? What self-care activities would give you a boost and allow you to feel more positive? And that just starts to give your mind and body some positive kindness and love, boosting your positive neurotransmitters naturally. So if you want to feel less anxious about something, challenge yourself to do it as often as you can. And using skills that will help you sit with anxiety will help you reduce it over time as you challenge yourself and teach your brain that you can do it. And these are my 4 favourite techniques that you can try that will help you feel less anxious each day as you practice and repeat. The first is writing down good things every day. Just ask yourself very simply, what's been good today? And perhaps write down 3 or 4 things that you've been pleased to notice. Now they don't need to be big things, just positive. And that just strengthens your ability to see the good in every situation. Secondly, breathe. Practice deep breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth several times a day. And that just helps calm and regulate your nervous system. Thirdly, challenge your negative thoughts. Really get into the habit of looking for the evidence of those thoughts. How likely is the outcome that you're worried about actually going to happen? And replace that negative outcome with a more neutral or a more positive one. And just look for the positive in every situation. Fourthly, don't avoid things. Challenge yourself gradually and do it as often as you can. Because when we learn to face those things that make us feel fearful, we expand our comfort zone and gradually we become stronger and braver. And if you want to learn a technique to help you do that, you need to watch this video next, and I'll see you there.